And hello, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the first of our webinar series for this week, uplifting LGBTQ youth throughout the week in sex education. This is the first time that SIECUS has really done this, and we have partnered with some amazing organizations. Shout out to the ones who are joining me today, Black and Pink, URGE, the National LGBTQ Task Force. I'm going to let all of the beautiful folks who are on with me today introduce themselves. But one thing that I wanted, just a couple of housekeeping notes before we jump in. So the first thing, all of the attendees, you can hear us. You will not be on camera. The only beautiful faces that you will be able to see are ours. You will be muted throughout the entire time of the webinar. We will have a question and answer portion of the webinar, and we will actually use the Q&A box. So all of you who are chatting, shout us out, tell us where you're from, where you're calling in from. But for question and answers at the end of the webinar, you'll use the Q&A function. So let's just dive in. So my name is Jennfer Driver. I am the Vice President of Policy and Strategic Partnerships with SIECUS. I'm going to go from people that I can see on the screen. My pronouns are she, her. I can't remember if I have said that, but they are she, her, and I will change it in my box so that everyone can see that. David, I'm going to start with you. If you don't mind, you're the first person I see, so tell us who you are.
Perfect. I'm David Booth. I'm the Deputy Executive Director for Black and Pink. My pronouns are Z, them.
Welcome, friend. Preston, I see you next.
Hello, friends. Preston Mitchum. My pronouns are he and him, and I am the Director of Policy with URGE, Unite for Reproductive and Gender Equity.
Taissa, I see you next.
Hey, y'all. Taissa, use she and they pronouns. I'm the Senior Policy Counsel at the National LGBTQ Task Force, and I use she and they pronouns. I said that. I think that's it.
Lovely. Dominique, I see you next, my friend.
Hey y'all, oh Lord, hey y'all, my name is Dominique Morgan, Lord have mercy. I am the Executive Director of Black and Pink. I use they, them pronouns.
So we're starting this week off talking about liberation and joy. Generally, when I join a lot of these LGBTQ plus webinars, they come off kind of depressing at some point, or there's not enough conversation about joy and liberation. And that's what we wanted to really kick off this week of action, really talking about. There is a lot of crap happening in this country. And, you know, it's important for us to really connect to things that bring us joy. So I wanted to kick us off. For those of you who are joining this entire week for the series, this is the only one that's kind of in a relaxed feel. I am on my couch. This is a couch conversations. If we were not COVID, we would all be sitting together, probably with some sort of bourbon drink in our hand and really enjoying this conversation, but we will make do. If you are, Dominique, I just saw you take a swig of something. If it is bourbon, I am here for it. If it is vodka, I'm here for that as well. If it's water, I'm kind of sad. So we will jump right in to this conversation. So I want to talk about joy. What's something that's bringing each of you joy in this moment? It is Pride Month. Talk to me about what's bringing you joy right now. Open it up for anyone. Just jump in. And I imagine you have to give it some thought, like what's giving me some joy. Go ahead, Preston.
I can start, mostly because what doesn't bring me joy is awkward moments of silence, and I'm still trying to work on that. But in the meantime, what gives me joy is this very queer, cheetah print shirt. And what also is really giving me joy, though, is, let me tell y'all something. I have been so excited by seeing people dream differently. Just the ability to be free. Conversations on defunding the police bring me joy. I share with folks often that something that I have really struggled with, especially the past 5 years, was like, I've been talking about defunding so much and what that can do for queer, trans, and non-binary folks. And I finally feel like I found so many of my people, like on the interwebs, who actually, feel like some of their ideas have been radical, even though they were never radical. They were just asking for the very things that they need to survive. And I've just really appreciated that. And to be honest, that's really what brought me joy. Also, some things that have been bringing me joy is the spirit of protest. Obviously, you know, some people protest out of pain, but some people protest because they want to see joy, right? And they want to celebrate joy and liberation and just kind of seeing this like collective solidarity. And then bodily autonomy and pleasure is bringing me joy. I'll share, since this is a couch conversation, I was sharing with Jennfer. I was like, I'm so tired of some organizations and the way they're talking about sex right now. I was like, just because people are having sex during COVID, right? And like, people need to actually talk about what that looks like, right? Maybe there are ways you can do it safer, whatever that word means when a conversations of sex ed, but you know, that people are having sex, and I think we're doing.
I mean, we're 3 months into this now. What are we, 3 months in?
It's 3 full months into this, and so there's been 3 full months of sex continually still. And yeah. I think, and people of some orgs have pretended that it hasn't existed because it makes people uncomfortable, and it's like, no. No, people are, and we actually must talk about what that looks like in a pandemic for sure, but we shouldn't deny that people are having sex. And the fact that people are actually still talking about how much sex they have is something that brings me joy.
Yeah.
I'll go next. So also, to trail off of Preston too, like self-pleasure too, like masturbation, like we're going to talk about sex ed this week. Let's just open up the floor to that, because I am finding a lot of joy and pleasure in that. I have discovered my body in ways that I didn't know my body could enjoy pleasure.
Yes.
And I also think too, like for me, it's finding pleasure and like finding my divinity. Like I'm that person who thinks that like we're all made of stardust, and and it's finding that like creatrix, that creator that's inside of you, and really unlocking your fullest potential. So I do that like by pulling tarot cards, or by doing yoga, or just by connecting with myself in a lot of ways. Dominique, who's on here, is my amazing executive director, and Dominique has actually allowed me quite a bit of time this past spring just to kind of really rediscover myself and figure out what makes me tick. And so it's just a lot of just refinding that creatrix that's inside.
I will go. I think, goodness, I think it is a little bit about sexual liberation has been interesting for me, because it feels like my body is changing rapidly. I started hormones like a week into like COVID really hitting our communities. And so like I'm going through all of these drastic changes kind of locked in the house by myself, which might have been the best for the community, because who knows, that was first couple of weeks of estrogen, lives that could have been lost, due to my hands. But it's been like this 38-year-old body, like things are shifting and changing, and going through puberty before, when I did not have access to any sort of sexual liberation or understanding of autonomy and all those things, it feels different. And I will also echo what Preston is saying. It's like to see a lot of the work that has been, that we have done that's been relegated as niche work or work that's on the fringe, to see it become mainstream in places. Now that brings a whole nother set of issues of having to maintain the authenticness of it all and all that, but it is a wow moment to see the New York Times or just people casually talk about defunding systems that a year ago, we were like, oh goodness, what type of lift would this be? And then being here with y'all, like y'all are my people in like real life. And it's been awkward not to see everyone as much as we were seeing each other. So I'm just excited to be here, and that really makes me happy. It's just to know that we're gonna be all right.
Yeah, these past 5 minutes have given me so much joy already, so I appreciate you all. And I think finding different communities, finding new communities, and rethinking how, at least personally, I've been doing the work, doing it kind of the same way for a few years, and just being, I don't know, invigorated to do it differently and to get out there. And I'm just appreciating and getting joy from all kinds of places that I didn't think I would be able to during these times, or didn't think I would. So
you actually hit on a point about doing work differently. I'm curious if any of you are actually doing your work differently. Do you feel it's either enhanced? Do you feel that there is a change in how you're doing your work or looking at your work right now?
I feel like for us, it's got, oh, Dom, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, for us, I feel like it's got a little bit more chaotic just because things are so up in the air. Like it feels like COVID happened, and all of a sudden this race war has happened. And so we've been having to pivot. And then with that pivot, like keeps popping up new opportunities and new ways to do things. And so, I mean, just last weekend, we had Cash App that presented us with an opportunity, and we had to pivot within 24 hours in order to have a fundraising campaign. So it's like,
also like, snaps to your Cash App win. That was huge.
So amazing.
What did y'all raise?
Congratulations.
Over $150,000 in a weekend? $200,000?
With Cash App's funds, we raised $200,000 in 24 hours.
208,000.
Insane.
So it's just constant pivoting into like, it's like we're finding new strengths and new skills, which I think, again, to bring it back to that pleasure and that joy conversation, is pleasure in saying, oh, hell, look at this. We have a new skill that we didn't even know we had. So yeah, I think that's where we're at.
I think for me, the shift was on top of everything else that David shared, and there's been awesome things that have happened, but COVID forced me to recognize that not only was I working from a space of reaction, Black and Pink as an organization was working that way. And we have this space where we intentionally hire and uplift and engage with folks who have been system impacted. And at Black and Pink, we use the term system impacted because I'm all about how do I create the largest center to, you know, like this whole thing of dismantling like norms and all that stuff, while also living in a world where these things exist and this is how we move. It's like, while dismantling them, how do I make sure that as many people can feel normal as possible? So the term system impacted reflects everyone who's been inside of a detention center, who's been inside a jail. If your daddy's been in jail, if your cousin been in jail. Do you remember when you were in school and that kid went off to foster care and you never saw that kid again, and you remember that? You've been impacted by systems. And it allows people to really step into the work and not separate themselves from it. And if they are doing the work, it forces them not to come at it from a savior aspect of, we want to help those poor people, of you are those people as well. So the way you engage should really be based on empathy and solidarity, right? But we can't be so reactive because these are systems that have been around for generations before us. And low key, I used to say generations after us, but low key, who knows what we're gonna see in a year? So I'm not even gonna speak that over our work anymore. But how do we make sure that we save room for ourselves? How do we make sure that we're not working on trying to be there for our people, trying to tear down these systems, and realizing that as much as I am the executive director of Black and Pink, I'm a Black and Pink member. And that has to matter. I think the financial piece is important to lift up because I think we all work for nonprofit agencies, and as radical as we would like to see our agencies or like to feel they are, we still are part of the nonprofit industrial complex. And there was a huge fear when COVID hit of, what I know looking at the documentation is that it's not, yes, we get beautiful donations where folks send these checks and it's like, oh, this is lovely. But on average, it's the folks who are making $100 that give us $5 of it, that support our work. And those are the folks who were laid off first. Those are the folks who are being impacted by COVID the most. So I'm like, goodness, how do I make sure that we bring in the funds to run this agency? And then, you know, things have happened, but then it's like, well, how do I have to still stay in that space of $1 million to dismantle a $1 billion system is cute, but it's a drop in the bucket. And so it's celebrating the wins while being focused on what is next. And that's easier to do when we are planning, when we have a method to it, and when we're being proactive in as many situations as possible. But that reactive piece, that anxiety, that part that makes you want to just take a nap in the middle of the day because your body just can't handle anymore, trying to dismantle the way we do that work so my staff and my team are healthier. And then we're able to model that for the folks we're serving, and we're able to really be around long term and do the work that we feel like we've been positioned to do.
Thank you.
What Dominique has just said, Dom, it resonates with me so much because like Dom knows, I love them so much. So just want to say that. And, but I've been thinking so much lately, particularly around like Urge's work, and then my work in particular around like how am I navigating the work? Because even when we had an office, right, I would still be pulling way too many hours a day. And then now that I'm home, I actually feel like I pull more.
We have talked about this.
Yeah, because I'm rolling out of bed, I'm showering, maybe when I get up in the morning, but who cares because I'm at home. And like when I actually realize I'm counting my hours, I'm probably like 12, 13, 14. And I'm like, this is not healthy or sustainable. And so I've been really trying to figure out what that sustainability looks like over time, because it's one thing to get work done. It's another thing for that work to get done when it's like transactional and it's rushed. You know, it's something about it feels a little bit, it feels like we're just reacting a lot, even when I'm trying to plan for being proactive. And I'm gonna keep probably pivoting back to defunding the police, because why not? And I think it needs to be overstated. Part of the reason why, like, you know, being proactive is so important is because in the many conversations I've had, especially over the past couple of months, around like violence intervention has been people struggling to think about why violence occurs in proactive ways. Like a lot of it have been conversations on like, well, if we, you know, if the police didn't exist, right, who would solve like quote unquote violent crimes, who would solve rape and murder, even though the police respond to those 6% of the time, and the amount of time that actually you'll see a conviction is like really small, frankly. And so I've been really talking a lot and challenging myself on what does it actually look to be proactive, right? When you're talking about like violence, when you talk about interventions, we can talk about interventions with sex ed. Like all of it actually matters about who's being proactive, right? The reason why some sex educators actually in a place of risk and harm, quite frankly, is like easily, you know, if we want to be honest, it's easily, frankly, just because they haven't really been proactive. A lot of it is actually like reactive to things around like quote unquote risk, and not like this expansiveness, not this abundance. And so those are all the things I've been thinking around, is like what proactivity can look like and how it actually helps marginalized communities. And then like when we're actually talking about proactive, like what do policies look like? What are the ways we can actually save a lot of folks, or at least reduce their harm so we're not fed the same BS we're fed every single day?
Yeah, I really appreciate, you know, everything you brought up, Preston, as well. I've been feeling a lot of limitations at like work, and running into those limitations and trying to like fight those I feel like is what is tiring me the most. And I'm finding as I'm kind of transitioning to what does my work look like outside of my 9-to-5 work, and that's felt much more liberating, much more that looks like me, less of these limitations I have to fight up. And it's just, I can get so creative and do the work in a way that is less tiring for me and it feels better for me. And I think that type of like transition that happened during this time is something I'm grateful for. But yeah, it's just been incredible.
So one thing that I know that I have missed out a little bit in this time is that role of community. What I love about Memorial Day in DC is Black Pride and all of the events that come along with it. What I miss about Atlanta is all of the Black Pride that comes along with like Labor Day. And so like I'm thinking about all of these spaces of community that I don't have that strong connection to because of COVID or because of whatever is really going on. And for me, there was a time where I was like, oh, I feel really liberated in this space. Like there was just some sort of connection. So I want to switch our topic a little bit to liberation and like what that means to you, and then like what it means within like sex education, and particularly for LGBTQ youth, LGBT youth of color, if you can identify as that. But like, what does it mean? What does liberation mean? What does it look like? And how do we? Let's just start there first, and then we'll unpack it a little bit more.
Sis, let me tell you. We on the couch, right? We on the couch.
Yeah, I'm sitting on the couch.
You know when a Black person look away, honey, and look back, it's about to get the universe really gooped me this year because, you know, my Blackness, my queerness was really, you know, founded in the streets of Omaha, Nebraska, right? And although we're the city where Malcolm X was born, I didn't until meeting some of you all. You know, I talk about this all the time, and I ain't gonna cry on this call because I got on a new hormone patch this morning. But as much as Preston talks about how he feels about me, it was really hard being Black and in this state and feeling so removed from everything. And so early on, it was only the online presence of Black. I don't think change makers really sufficiently reflects what what I was able to find, but it was being able to see that I wasn't abnormal, that I wasn't alone, that what I was trying to get access to for me and my people I wasn't asking for too much, that I could be just as Black as I was queer, and people gonna see it, or they're going to just have to suffer. And Preston was one of the first people who I really was able to watch and learn from, who was close to my age, who was doing the work that I wanted to do, but was living very unapologetically, in a way that I feel you should live. Living unapologetically for themselves, with the knowledge that people are watching, and if people get a blessing from it, awesome. But Sonia Renee Taylor, who's incredible, The Body's Not an Apology, Sonia did an Instagram video where it's like, something can be for you and not about you. And so it wasn't this performative display of Blackness and queerness, it was, I'm just living. And then but I'm getting to watch somebody whose body looks like mine, be in some cute shorts, with the shirt open, giving them a little chest. And then in the next minute, be a part of a fraternity. And the next minute, be talking about abolition. And the next minute, be talking about Beyonce's latest single. Like the variance of Blackness and queerness that people had tried to stamp out of me, Preston was one of the first real, like, complete representations of that, and it was through social media. And then once I was able to physically get in spaces with folks, I think the first time Preston and I ever like really saw each other was at the SIECUS conference last year. And I was like, child, don't let me act like a groupie up in these people's place. Jesus, don't let me do this.
Oh no.
But right, so I finally got my people, and then this year came and I'm like, I got my people, I got a little bit of coin. Girl, I'm about to be on all the planes. Like, I'm looking at my calendar and Black Pride was there, sis. I'm like, listen, we in the hotel where I need to look over the whole crowd. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna get me a schedule. I done downloaded Grindr, Scruff, Jacked, Plenty of Fish. I got messenger pigeons. I'm going to get my life, sis. I had ordered gallons of spunk. Did you hear me? I got 40, sis. That my summer was supposed to be a lituation. And then Mother COVID said, no, ma'am, you'll sit down. And so there was a lot of grief at first. And it was, Dominique, what are you chasing? Because you're at the point where you can only spend so much money at the grocery store each week. Amazon ain't delivering like it used to. So what are you chasing? You got what is your purpose outside of the salary, the job, and all of that? And then I had to pivot. I'm like, it's my people. And then I had to change how I checked in on my people. It was sending text messages. The ease of us being connected, I think, has made us appreciate each other more, and then be better about how we lean into each other. And I'm very blessed to have a close circle of Black queer folks here in Omaha. And then we had Lighting House, where we could kind of sneak off and be in the midst of COVID without judgment. It'll be 4 or 5 of us there, child. We just gonna get some chicken and we're gonna sit here and we're gonna cry and we're gonna do what we have to do and we're gonna make it. So I had to reassess what really was going to bring me joy. I had to really make sure that I was reaching out and showing up for my people, because COVID or not, these are the people that I love and the people that make me better, right? And then it was, what is my new access to Black liberation and joy? You know, go child, watch some polls, like doing these things, watching the first member of the Black and Pink House movement was a young Black trans woman. I haven't felt that sort of Black joy in a lot while watching this child have a safe space. So it was recalibration, but I just needed to speak that it was some grief at first. And it was intense. And I think there's still moments where I'm just like, oh, yo, I would be here right now. Oh, this would be going on right now. And that's okay. Because as much as you feel joy, you're gonna feel grief, you're gonna feel loss. Don't block that, because it'll just get stopped up, and then by God, it'll show up in the most ridiculous ways, I think.
We gotta go still?
I mean, if you can, you know.
Preston is on you now. Go for it.
Right? Because, like, I'm like, I should have brought some tissues.
Listen, I don't even know what to say. I'm just gonna say something. I would say that resonates completely, and not just because all the great things that were said about me. Thank you. No, but it resonates because I don't know if I ever, even as a Black queer person, I don't know if I ever was afraid of death, right? Like I felt like it was something that could speed up because of systems and how they interact with us. But COVID really like petrified the hell out of me. And it was just such a hard reality to actually realize that I was actually, from the first month of COVID, at least what we knew as COVID in the United States, I did not go outside of my apartment. Like I literally stayed inside for 24 hours a day for about 4 weeks. And I think that is it's hard to really say out loud because I got incredibly depressed. You know, I was on social media a lot, and I tend to be on social media a bit, right? But it's different when you feel like you're forced to be on social media. Because then when you start to be forced on social media, then you started to see videos of anti-Black violence. And then you started to see, you know, anti-trans violence and anti-queer violence. And so you were stuck at home by yourself or with a roommate, if you have a roommate or family, kind of navigating your own trauma, right? Because many people were afraid that they would not live. We saw people dying, right? Friends, coworkers, loved ones, you know, and so we saw all of this and we were still just told to move on. And then the way a lot of us, at least as a Black person, the way we build community is like through face-to-face interactions, through getting together, through laughter, through touch. And all of it was impossible. The thing that could actually bring us joy and liberation was literally impossible. And so then we wanted to shift, and by having Zoom happy hours, and I was just tired at that point. I'm like, I don't want to see y'all no more online. Like, and that was just a real thing. It's just like the thing that I know brings me joy are happy hours. It brings me joy because it's in person. There's a connection that's in person. That's a loving communal connection. Online, no matter how much I love folks, it's not the same thing, right? And so I say all of that to say, like, one of the things that I immediately recognized, though, was like this grief, like this idea that I could die, and I'm actually slowly dying. I'm weathering, you know, honestly, to use a health term, like I'm actually weathering. Like it's like I actually see myself slowly dying. And I think that was the part that was hard. And we were just still like figuring out so many things. And so what I appreciate now about some months passing is that it has given me time to reframe, right? So while people were like so frustrated about like a lot of Black folks who obviously were, you know, testing higher across the country, you know, obviously pre-existing conditions is only a part of the conversation because it doesn't say why Black folks have pre-existing conditions, right? They just say, oh, we know, you know, deaths are being exacerbated because of pre-existing conditions. Never mind actual like racist healthcare systems, right? Never mind clinical and cultural incompetency. Never mind food deserts. Never mind environmental racism, right? It was just a very like myopic viewpoint of like pre-existing conditions plus race equals death, right? And so I think like when I started going outside more, when I saw people going outside more, and people were literally angry enough to protest police brutality during the global health pandemic, it really, first of all, it showed how angry people had to be to just get up off their seats, not even think about like death in the form of global health pandemic, but think about it in the form of police brutality, to where they still got up out and started protesting. And I think after a while, people were just like, you know what? I don't really care anymore about this. I am going to live my life as much as I can. And I know that may be hard for some people to expect or respect, but what I recognize it is that is a form of liberation and joy, right? When you're so exhausted by being in your house for months after like kind of seeing yourself and your loved ones like weather away, to just transforming that and just saying, you know what, I'm gonna take the power back into my own hands. And this is the way I know how to do it. Now we see, of course, cases still popping up consistently, but I think you see less of a fear from people because people were just exhausted by having, you know, to just sit in their house all day and experience like this lack of joy and liberation.
So in that same conversation, you know, you talk about the protest, you see a lot more people, you see people coming out, and then the word of solidarity keeps coming up, right? And like, what does solidarity look like? I have seen a lot of, I mean, Preston, you already mentioned it, a lot of anti-Blackness really was showing up, a lot of anti-queer, anti-trans, and then folks wanted to be in solidarity. I'm curious, I'm gonna turn to David and like Taissa, like what is solidarity as either non-Black POC or a white person? Like what does this mean, and like what have you kind of seen during this time as well?
I will say just because I had so many feelings when Preston was talking, my wife got sick with COVID, and it was a really terrifying couple weeks where it was like every few hours, like, okay, should we go to urgent care? Should we go to the hospital? And it was just, I just, at that point was in like, okay, I gotta go, I gotta check in, I gotta do all these things. And when she thankfully got better, it was just like a month or like a long time where I just completely shut down. And we're still, like as part of the work, I'm still here trying to do the work and just wasn't giving myself space to process, I guess, what happened. And now as I'm kind of trying to process everything and coming back, I'm just, like I mentioned before, I'm just trying to envision different ways. And I think because we're often spending time putting out fires all the time, or we put so much energy into trying to survive and navigate this world, we often aren't given the opportunity to like envision what liberation looks like. And I think that, giving ourselves that space, if we have the opportunity to do so, or give us the time to prioritize it, can really be an act of joy. And I think for me, as I'm finding and getting in touch with so many new communities, I'm getting so much life out of these like all these API groups that, especially I just moved to New York a few months ago, and it's great out here. I'm like finding all my people, and we like have similar views, where there was just like a dearth of that type of community I felt where I lived before. And it's just kind of, as I mentioned, like it's, when we're talking about liberation, it's just like all of our liberation is tied together, and that's just what it is. We have to be doing the work. We have to be doing the work with our communities, mobilizing our communities. And, before I will admit that a lot of the time and be like, okay, well, I do the work at work, I just want to chill. And if that means like, I just can't deal with this person on my Facebook right now, I'm just not gonna deal with him. I'm not going to change my mind. It doesn't matter. And now I'm like organizing my D&D group. I'm like, what are we learning today? What are we doing? And finding really cool opportunities, like working with a friend who I play D&D with, and we're like, okay, how can we like change legislation in your state around qualified immunity? And we're just like doing the work in so many different ways that is really great. And I just feel like this is all kind of messy, what I just said, but it's just like, that's what it feels like. It just, so many things happened in the past few months to me personally, and just to take time to process it. And I'm just now realizing that I haven't. So yes, I'll stop there.
Qualified immunity in Dungeons and Dragons. Not sure I would have put those things. I love it. You
talk later. Let's talk.
Cool. Well, Jennfer, I'll answer your question about allyship then. I'm going to tie it back to Taissa, because Taissa, you made a really great point about like, it's about all of us. Like our liberation is tied up in like each of us, but I also think that our liberation is also tied up in white people, because white people have a lot of fucking work to do, like point blank. We just do. We talk a lot about like dismantling racism. I want to take that one step further and actually like reverse engineer like white supremacy and racism. And by that, I mean like, as white folks, we've centered ourselves, whether it's in our DNA, it's in our historical lineage, or whether we've done it in our own lives, like we've centered ourselves in this moment of like power and privilege. And so now it's our job to decenter ourselves. And that means like checking in with yourself, re-examining that power and privilege. Like, how do you explicitly or implicitly contribute to systems of oppression? And that, it's a daily practice. It's not something that says, oh, well, I've done this today, so I'm good, point blank, stop. Like, no, you have to do this every day. You have to commit to this every day. And it's asking, we talk a lot about community agreements, like prison abolition spaces, we talk about community agreements a lot. And one of my favorites is move up, move up. And this is one of my favorites because it's really like asking you to interrogate your growth. I've talked about this a number of times over the past couple months, just because it's one of my favorites. And it's also like the easiest for me to relate to. And for this, it's like, you either speak more and you move up into a space of listening, or you listen more and you move up into a space of speaking more, and whether or not you need to speak out more. But either way, it's like you're moving your ego out of the conversation, and you're saying, let's invite in learning. Let's see, who needs to lead in this conversation, whose voice needs to be heard, and whose voice needs to be centered. And, as white people, especially when we're thinking about like COVID and we're thinking about like these race things that are happening, like white people need to take a step back and sit down and let, the Black folks, let the people of color stand up and do their thing, because they've been doing this for God knows how long. Like, they know what the hell they're doing. They don't need allies either. They've been, sitting in their own Black excellence for as long as I know. Like, I still work with dope Black people. Like, and I love every last one of them, and I will continue to support them just because, honestly, they're way more brilliant than I could ever hope to be, just because they're rooted in community. They're rooted in this like sense. I'm getting goosebumps now just thinking about it. Like, they're just rooted in the sense of survival because that was how they were forced to live. And I'm like, that shouldn't be it. Like, you should be rooted in like that community and that spirit of solidarity, because that's how y'all have gotten this work done. I mean, you see it in every protest. It's this sense of solidarity and like, what resources do we have? How do we pull these? How do we do this? Where white people's like, well, who can I step on to make this happen? And so we need to take a step back and be like, all right, so how am I showing up in this space? And is there something that my privilege can contribute to in order for me to create more space for somebody else? Like, how can I be a buffer in order, like putting my body on the line? Say if I'm at a protest, like make sure my ass is in the front line, making sure that my body's the one that takes the bullets, because that's what it needs to be. I mean, Black people and people of color have been taking bullets for so damn long. Like, so I think just being a white ally is just checking in with yourself, checking in with your privilege, and making sure that you're not taking up any more space than you need to be, because honestly, white people have been taking up too much damn space as it is.
Can I just also add, Jennfer, non-Black POC have a shit ton of work to do. And I just want to say that we have a lot of work to do in dismantling white supremacy ourselves. And we are not exempt from that work. We need to do it.
And Preston and Dominique, there's still some solidarity within our own community that we need to be doing. And I'm curious what your thoughts are around that.
When you say within our community, like within Black folks?
Yeah, I do.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, it's not lost on me. I saw a post on Twitter, and it is not lost on me the ways in which Black women are all, we are the Democratic Party, right? We are the ones who are pushing. We are the folks, and who is like, where is the solidarity? At the same time, trans, right? Black trans women, we will talk about Black Lives Matter, but like how we need to be talking about all Black lives, so we have some work within our own community. This is not a place for us to air out our stuff amongst the people. We're not about to do that. But I am curious about like what solidarity, like in your mind, looks like in this moment.
Yeah, so I just ranted about this the other day, or every day, however we're defining days. And I remember, in the late 1930s, Zora Neale Hurston said, in Their Eyes Are Watching God, Black women are the mules of the world. And, it makes me think a lot around like the pressure that we put on Black women, cis, trans, among others, to actually perform a certain way consistently, but rarely have, right, that solidarity back onto to Black women. And so, I'll speak specifically about like protest and Black Lives Matter specifically. And I think it's important to be clear, right? When people talk about Black Lives Matter, it's always important to be clear whether we're talking about the actual like organizational infrastructure.
Correct.
The movement as we know, right? Because Black Lives Matter as an organization, we know was queer Black women, who started really it as an organization itself, and really started the movement. So I don't want to mitigate the movement that they actually started, but sometimes movements unfortunately are then carried from society and put on social media and then kind of gets lost in what it actually was started for. And so, clearly we know when they're in again, knowing that this is not the kitchen table conversation of just, Dom, myself, and Jennfer, I'll just at least share that, something I think needs to be said very publicly and openly, which is that like, we know, the people who are oftentimes marched for when it comes to like police violence are cis het Black men. Like that's the trending names. Those are the hashtags that we often see, right? We don't really, you know, I mean, maybe some now and again we'll talk more about like people like Breonna Taylor, but not in comparison, right? And not that it's an oppression Olympics, but when it comes to like, when it comes to Black women who are killed by the police, because police violence is gendered violence, and gender violence is many things, right? That obviously impact queer and trans folks and Black women broadly. Right, we protest and we march for the Eric Garners, the George Floyds, we can continually name, frankly, but we likely won't name the Breonna Taylors, the Sandra Bland's, the Yvonne Smallwoods, Miriam Carey's, the Ayanna Stanley Jones, we can continually name, some of us can continually name Black women who have been killed by systems and our system impacted, but won't receive anything, right? Like, and I think that needs to be named. So where my role as a queer Black man, as a queer cis Black man, is to call that shit out every single day, right? I'm always very clear with people who follow me on anything. Like, the thing that we're oftentimes talking about are Black men, regardless if I'm queer or not, right? Like, at the end of the day, I know if I was, God forbid, killed by the police, I know I would still probably get more national outcry than God forbid you, Jennfer. Like, we just know those things to be the case, and I think we have to really interrogate why. Does it make my experiences good? Hell no. Like, of course not, right? But it's very clear when we're actually talking about what intersectionality means, more than a buzzword, right? More than just words on paper. If it's an actual politic, there's something there that needs to be kind of unpacked. And what needs to be unpacked is that many men, Black men included, like, experience a lot of privilege that we're not willing to unpack because we know we're also experiencing state violence. But I still think we need to call attention to the fact that, again, gender violence is police violence, and many Black women, cis and trans, are impacted by these systems in grave numbers, and we never talk about it. Well, maybe we do.
I'm seeing a lot of expression on your face. I'm curious what your thoughts are right now.
I had a lot of processing to do prior to coming out as trans, whatever the fuck that means in this day and age. But if I had to describe like one of the huge hurdles I have in even navigating this whole space of they, them pronouns versus she, her pronouns is a knowledge that there was going to be a shift to where I was no longer going to be a consistent support and resource for Black women and not be a Black woman myself. Of knowing that I was going to be taking one of the numbers off the board, the few numbers that already exist that Black women could find in cis Black men, queer or not, that really looked at their safety and really loved them in a way that you can only love something that feels like you come from them. I struggled and struggle with that. That is something that I don't know if I can relinquish. I don't know if I want to just be another Black woman, Black non-cis person that's loving Black women in the way that Black women have to love and fight for each other's survival. And I am also afraid that the foothold that I have had in being able to challenge other Black men and how they show up for Black women will be lost. And recognizing that a piece of that is a selfish understanding that even in my queerness, being a Black man in Black spaces brought me some protection and some safety. And knowing that on like last Saturday when we had that moment with Cash App, like when I got on that camera, I really was just going to talk about people donating what we had to do in 24 hours. It was not meant for me to really talk clearly and publicly about this transition I've been going through. But I remember when I got off the live, it was just like, everything's going to be different now. Everything's going to be different. And I'm really angry that because we experience so much around white supremacy and all these things that affect us, and that's what we get to talk about when we finally get a space with each other is, ooh, child, let me tell you what the fuck these white people did today. that we don't get to our stuff. Like, that's what I've seen repeatedly. Being in the work is that you go to these conferences, you go to these sessions that are Black folks only. They give us 45 fucking minutes. And it's like the first 40 is like, these white folks are pushing me to the edge. And then we might get to like the issues around gender identity within Black communities. Like it just, we don't get enough space with just us to unpack our stuff. And that's the part that's scary, is that we kind of have to depend on us to kind of do our stuff in small groups and hope that there's shift that happens. But still there are these microchasms of safety and understanding amongst our Black folks when we know it needs to be unified. What people saw in these uprisings was a historic moment where Black folks were all on the same page. From DC to LA, from Alaska to Omaha to Atlanta, Black folks said, fuck this, on the same issue. And that's, as much as we want to believe that folks are talking about abolition and defunding because they know it's right, no, these white folks are afraid. And they believe that if they acquiesce in these ways, that they're going to keep much of the power that they've had. Like, this is really a bone they're giving us. Let us not be gagged and gooped and think otherwise. And then I recognize, if we could find a way to really permeate these conversations among Black folks, my God, the shift we could see. But because of the insidious ways that white power lives, they keep us apart. And then they do so much harm to us that when we finally get together, we're doing triage to each other so we can go back into the war. So that's been my thoughts. It's like, how do we do this work when we're just all going through so much? And then my personal shift as a person of realizing that I'm not ready to grieve the allyship that has meant so much to me with Black women. When I think I'm seeing Tracy talk in this chat, and I'm, Jennfer, like, even just, like, y'all are my sisters. And it's a different thing of there's a privilege for me to be in a space where I can support you or protect you if that's what you want me to do, or just be a listening ear. And then it's like, do we live in a world where only Black women will really show up for Black women? And we're talking about Black queer men too. Black queer men, it's a reality that the harm and the destruction that Black queer men have experienced, they push it back on other people because it's just so much in there. Andrew and I were doing these sessions about the responsibility of Black queer men to Black women. We're not fighting over these men. These men are for everybody. We're not fighting for these men. These men are for everybody. We're not trying to emulate Black women because we want to be them. We emulate things from Black women because Black women are the reason that we are here. They're usually the safest spaces we had. It's where we learn how to be good humans. It's where we learn how to love next to our mama's knees. And so we love and show up the same way. It's all of these nuanced reasons that we are there, and we have so much more in common than otherwise, but because of how folks digest harm, it comes out in these terrible ways. Because of misogynoir and supremacy, Black women are positioned to be sometimes complicit to the harm that happens to queer communities, right? Based in the harm they've experienced. It's like, ain't nobody been there for me, so how many folks you fucking want me to show up for? Like, there's just so much truth, and then we never get to get into it. Y'all, I think most of us have had a little bit of therapy in our lives. It's like, Black folks get one therapy session of a year when we all get together at the conference, right? We have that moment where we unpack it, and baby, we better milk it for all we can. That's why anytime we're all together, I'm like, where y'all at? Mm-hmm. Let's milk it for what we can. And then it's like, yo, we'll wait till next time. Or we hope that we see each other. So I know that was long-winded, but it's so much heaviness that I've seen, and there's so many unanswered questions from a micro space of myself, and then larger. If we're having all this revolution, I'm like, yo, this is the perfect time for us to have a revolution about the shit that really keeps us from being as strong as we can. And I don't know how to slip that in there without folks feeling like we're derailing from the main point of view. And when I'm trying to say that Black lives matter, but Black love matters. And the more that we have Black love amongst each other, And the more that we have this defense against these systems of whiteness, they're not going to be able to get between us. It's because they continue to dismantle and try to rip up our Black love and make us believe that we need them to be seen. When I have never been seen more than by a Black person. I have never been appreciated more than by a Black woman. I have never felt as powerful as I felt when I've been sitting at a table of Black people. And the moment I was able to divest from the necessity of whiteness to tell me that I'm great, it changed my life. But how do we have that conversation on a large scale when our people are dying in our news feed and we're just trying to tell people don't kill us? How do we get to not only don't kill us, but we have to love each other and our love is powerful and can save us?
Thank you. Thank you. So I will admit we are coming up on time. I am going to open it up for Q&A for folks to put some question and answers in the Q&A box. Panelists, if you are not looking at the chat box, you need to be, because there are some really great points that folks are putting out there. My sister friend Tracy is all in it, and I adore her for putting all of this love through here and so many others. So folks, on the webinar, if you have a question or question for our wonderful panel, if you will put it in the Q&A feature, for those of you who are looking for it, if you hover over the bottom of your screen, there should be a little bar that pops up. You can put it in the Q&A. You can also, so I know. So most of the panel, so folks who are attendees, who are on, a lot of folks are just chatting specifically to the panelists. So that's why their comments aren't seen publicly. So they are just chatting directly to the panelists versus all folks. So that's why they're not visible to everyone. So yeah, I want to continue the conversation while we wait for some Q&A. And if we don't get any, this has been a really great, I can continue to talk and we can continue to have this conversation. So David, when we first opened up this call, we started talking about it, one of the things that you immediately went to, and I think either Preston or somebody, Preston too, Preston talking about folks were still having sex, right? Folks were, and we were talking about whether you're having it with someone else or you're having it with yourself. Either way, you're still having this pleasure. And so I'm going to pause right now because this is actually a really important question. Do Dominique and Preston have links to donate to? Dominique or Preston, Dominique, would you like folks to donate to Black and Pink, or where would you? I'm gonna let you answer that question.
Yes, please donate to Black and Pink. I'm gonna put our donation link in here. It's been very important for us as we figure out how we divest from systems to really understand the power of us funding our work from the community to be able to do the work we need to do. So anything is so appreciated, and we thank you. So I think that my link goes to the other panelists, but hopefully somebody can flip that. And my director of programs, Andrew Aliman, is on here and saying they thank you, because if Andrew hears $1 coming in, Andrew is trying to think how many of those quarters are his for a program. So all support will be so appreciated.
I will make sure it goes out to all. So when everyone should have the link there. I also so we are having some questions coming in. So I'm actually going to pause on my question or where I was going and get some of these questions. The first one that came in is, what advice would you give to young people or younger than 18 who are doing the anti-racism work?
I would look to see, finding pleasure in your body, like finding what does pleasure mean for you, because this work will eat you up, spit you out, and then stomp all over you. It really will. And you've got to be able to have something where you just find joy and pleasure at the end of the day, because otherwise it's going to tear you up. I spent 10 years doing this work, And I only recently came back to this work because I got burnt the fuck out. Like I couldn't do it. I came back because Dom asked me to come back, and, I will uplift and support Dom every damn day of the week. They're just an amazing activist, but like Dom has been consistently supporting me. And I think like just working with Dom has been a pleasure, but then also like this year, Dom also uplifted me and allowed me to find out like who I am as a person, allowed me to like really dig into like, who am I outside this work? Because I think that when you're doing this anti-racism work and just social justice work in general, you have to know who you are outside of the work. Because if you don't know who you are outside of your work, you're going to identify with your work, and it's going to literally just it's going to kill you. You're going to want to keep jumping to the next project and the next project and the next project. And then you're going to end up wondering at 35, who the fuck are you? What do I do? What brings me joy? What brings me pleasure? What are my hobbies? What do I like? What do I not like? So just find what pleasure looks like in your body. Note it, note some self-care activities, and every damn day, make sure you commit to it.
For me, so one, yes, I agree with what David has just said, and also donate to Urge. I did put the link in there. It will really help a lot of we do a lot of obviously policy advocacy and organizing and mass mobilization work right now, really fleshing out our divest invest campaigns. And so like really what does it look like to divest from policing, school resource officers and campus police officers, and invest into housing for students and funding abortions and not law enforcement. So just a couple things. So this question, I honestly, for me, it would depend on the young person who's asking it. So, and when I say that, I think, I would contextualize it with like race, sexual orientation, gender identity, because my advice would probably be a little different. Ultimately, I would say, and this is very cliche, but I would say like what's important is to not give up. I mean, to not give up, and to make sure that you're actually resting too. So when I say to not give up, that sounds really cliche in the sense that, of course we want to keep doing this work, right? We want to keep fighting. But the real truth is white people have so much, and I'm being very intentional. Everyone has work to do. White people in particular have a lot of work to do. So I remember a couple of years ago, I had a close friend, or they're still a close friend. Let me not make it seem like this is what set drama off. So I have a friend, this white woman who was telling me a story, and she's like, my cousin is so racist. And, I had to delete her off Facebook. And I was like, oh, hold on. Why did you delete her off Facebook? And she's like, I just couldn't take it anymore. And I said, but who's gonna do that work now? That means Black folks and other people of color gotta then tell your cousin about their racism? And so then I think it really, I don't think anyone has ever presented to her in that way before. But I think I was extremely mad that she decided that's the way she was doing the work was to worry about her self-care. And while she's worried about her self-care, Black folks are dying. And so I'm just like, no, you can't give up. There are many people that we can cut off for that a variety of reasons, right? Because we know what trauma looks like. We know what navigating that trauma and harm looks like. But there are particular work that people with privilege and power and who have the ability to actually enact that power, have to do, right? And so to young people, I work with young people so much. And one of the things that young people are going to be the ones to save the world, period, right? And so I want to caution us sometimes though, because the way we talk about young people is about the future, right? Young people are present. They are presently doing work. They're actively doing work now, right? So it's not this idea young people are going to change the future. It's no, young people are the present, right? And they're going to continue to do work, and the present is going to change the future. But we have to be very careful about how we actually discuss young people, right? And the ways we actually patronize young people, even when we think we're being well-intentioned. But I really love this question around what young people can do and what advice. The advice I would have is just to not give up, right? The work is hard. The work is daunting. All of us on this call, I'm sure, have been doing this work for years. And it's hard. It is hard, right? Because upending and dismantling white supremacy is not easy, right? We know that. And so that's that is the most simple, but honestly really comprehensive advice I can give.
So we have questions actually flooding in. So I'm going to just pivot to a lot of Q&A, and we can go through this. The first one that's coming in, can someone talk a little bit more about the importance of sex education during this time of virtual school, how we're supporting those efforts, what does joy and liberation within sex ed, especially for young people, really look like? Who wants to take that one?
I think it's just important for that whole piece of like, who are you investing your time and energy in when it comes to the work? And really being clear about who's necessary to shift what you're trying to shift. I believe young people in the work, and young as in new to the work, or young as in age, because I've met some folks who are 18 who've been out here organizing since they was 10, who can run, you know, rings around me. So not an age issue, young to the work. You really need to understand what you're trying to achieve and who's necessary for that process. Despite what your supervisor may say, sometimes despite what the grant may say, of who you should be talking to, because nothing is worse than being passionate, feeling like this work is about your life, and then you're waking up every day talking to people and you're like, these aren't the people I should be working with. These ain't the people I should be spending 8 hours a day with. This isn't the answer here. So I think it's really important to challenge that, and we have to be better about creating opportunities that folks can walk into where that's the circumstance from the beginning. Because so many of us get in those spaces because we're just fighting for a job, we're fighting for an opportunity, and so we kind of suffer through it. And Black folks, we normalize that suffering. I don't know anyone who's in these organizations who are in this work and they're not being seen or feeling like their value is being recognized and they have access to joy and liberation. You can take all the vacations, you can take all the days off, but the pain, the hurt is present in their faces. We all know Black folks where we see them and we walk down the hallway at the conference and we're like, "Child, you good?" And it's just like you've seen them lose part of themselves to this work. And what I believe is possible, and what I am being blessed to experience, is that yes, you're going to be pouring into the work and pouring into people and pouring into these values. But when you are positioned to do it in a way where you are seen, you are respected, and you're uplifted, it's reciprocal pouring. So as much as you give out, you're getting. And it's not that kind of pale, flat-faced look that you see people see once they've been completely depleted. And that's what I saw with David. David and I came into Black and Pink as the president of the board and vice president of the board. And when they left, I was devastated, but I was like, this is what they need. And I did not want to come back to them with asking for it, because I knew anything I asked them to do, they would do. So I said, before I make an ask, I said, I need to have an opportunity that supports them doing their thing, and also where they can have access to what is next. And that's the last thing I'm going to say. It's very hard to be out here putting your mind, your body, and spirit on the line, and you don't know what's next. And definitely respecting what's next when it comes to a community liberation conversation. But I'm talking about your individual liberation conversation. Like what is next? Don't let these people tell you the only thing you're good for is sacrificing yourself. I said this to a friend the other day. Being a martyr is not meant to be any of our legacies. I don't believe that Jesus was my martyr. So I'll be damned if I'm gonna believe that these people around me, that the only thing we have to give is for us to give our lives and not live our lives at the same time. I think that's Black liberation comes through that. White folks who are on this, white folks who are managers, and I'm talking to you all white folks as an executive director, stop fucking up these Black folks if y'all ain't ready to have them in your organization. I would rather go to your website and it's full of white people and it's white people harming each other and y'all doing what y'all do and y'all engaging in shenanigans, instead of all this trickery. And you get these Blacks in here and y'all have these radical, it ain't in your mission statement, it's these raggedy ass vision statements that you try to goop us with. You done coach your president of the board to come into the interview and give us all this bullshit, and we get in there and we recognize the star I was, and one of the reasons you wanted me, you want to dim that. What I told you I wanted to come in here and change, and you said you were all we're about, all of a sudden there's all these barriers I got to go through to do that. And then I've told all my Black people I came into this agency to make change, and so now I'm afraid to leave because I'm afraid to let my Black folks down. And then y'all thrive off of that. Stop. If you're not ready for us, leave us alone. Hire us for a contract. Pay us and let us be our own person. If you're not ready to have a Black person on your staff, leave them alone. And I'm talking about from young Black folks to seasoned Black folks in the work. Stop doing that to us. Black folks who are in leadership, because we were harmed, it doesn't mean they got to go through the same harm, love. And it doesn't mean that they're working for it less. It doesn't mean that what we had to work for is the value of it is decreased. It just means that's why we went through it, so they don't have to. There's so many of us Black folks that are a tool for these white people, and these white people know it. We have to stop. I've been privileged to lead an agency and see it. I can't, if I could, I'd hire every Black person I know. My budget don't allow though. And some of y'all make a whole lot, so bitch, I can't even pull that coin together like that. But nonetheless, I just want to say that please be prepared for the type of people that you're bringing in your agency, not for the work you want them to impact, but to make sure that they leave feeling really seen and better than when they came. A part of your work as a leader, as a manager, as an executive director of an organization is who are you, while you're here, what are you preparing yourself for, and how can I help you do it? Y'all don't want to pour into people knowing that what you pour into them may be used at the next agency, and that's your problem. Everything you do for the people who work for you may not benefit your org at that time, but it benefits the ecosystem. But that takes you to understand that the answers are many. The hands in the work have to be many. And that's how we have change happen. Also, philanthropy perpetuates that, but that's a whole nother circle. I'm gonna shut up.
So thank you. You are getting a lot of praise for what you were saying. For folks who are asking questions about the recording, yes, there will be a recording. It will be shared. People are wanting to share this, that statement. We may even fast forward to that statement to share with their executive managers, their execs, for what they should be doing. That's fun. I am appreciating Samantha on this call right now. So a lot of folks are saying thank you to that. Also, for those who are asking about the donations, yes, we can send all of the links for the donations for where you can donate. So really, I'm going to zoom through. So I'm going to ask you all to give us the rapid fire responses so we can get to some of these questions, as many as possible. So the first one that came up is, how do we continue to celebrate queer joy away from the capitalist form of Pride Month?
I can take this one. So this one, like,
Sure.
this actually ties in with Tracy Gilbert's thing too about like what role, if any, would you say that pleasure plays in fulfillment of liberation? If you think about it, trans and queer people, and I put trans first because trans should always fucking come first. When you ever hear me say it, I say trans and queer. But our joy and liberation is tied up together because if you look at it, our bodies, the way that we express our sexual orientation, the ways that we express our gender identity, and the ways that we just express our gender have always been punished and criminalized. And it's just that when we do this joy and liberation, we're telling the system that fuck this, my body is beautiful, my body is brilliant, and you have no control of it. You're not going to sit here and tell me that you have any matter of control over it. And so for joy and liberation with this, and the reason why I bring up pleasure so much is for me to assert control over myself and to find pleasure in my body and to say, no, this is me, this is who I am. If you don't like it, you can fuck off. Like this is how I'm going to do things.
Thank you. The next question is, sex ed sometimes leaves students feeling vulnerable, but I have heard many Black colleagues and authors speak about how hard it is for students of color to be vulnerable at school. How can I, as an educator, do better to foster a safe space for students who already feel vulnerable at school? Did y'all get that?
Yeah, I can start. This is an amazing question. And to be honest, I think most people, so yes, that is a name thing, right? That many students of Black, Indigenous, and other students of color feel particularly vulnerable. I think we have to actually question why though, right? So I will say this, I don't think there's a such thing as a safe space. I don't think you can actually declare that someone will be safe. I think you can make spaces braver for people to feel, vulnerable and come forward at the same time. So part of, I've been thinking about it a lot is just what sex ed means for people, right? Because sex ed should be able to transform people's lives in society, right? Like quality sex ed, right? Taught by instructors, covers a wide range of topics, right? That are deeper than just like what we know about like the traditional quote unquote sex, right? They include relationships, decision-making, condom negotiation, gender identity, body image, birth control, like STIs, among other things, right? So they're not like this, what most people think about sex ed obviously is like, you know, it's very like heteronormative. It's, you know, it doesn't really get to the heart of what we on this call mean by when we say sex ed, right? And so when it talks about vulnerability, what we're talking about is the ability of someone to actually come forward. We have so many people who are actually experiencing so much harm at home that a lot of what people experience in school, for many of them, are their outlet, right? To get away from the repression, to get away from like what feels contrived and controlled. And so that's why, you know, I think the best way is to actually explain to someone, right? Like people are not gonna take a step or move forward if they feel like you're coming to them in a very rudimentary way. So if the way like people are actually, like the way you should build relationships is not when they start talking about sex ed, right? Like those relationships should have already started being formed over a period of time, right? And so many students of color, one thing that we know is community. We know trust. We know like what those relationships feel like and look like. It goes to a lot of Dom's points earlier. Like we know what it looks like to love and to not experience love, and what it looks like to hurt and to know who's actually hurting us, and what spaces don't look like that will be for us, and what spaces actually replicate the very harm that we see consistently. So, you know, I always say that if people of color and Black folks in particular really aren't sharing, it's likely because you have not created a space that actually feels like they can fold into. And so, you know, I think part of that is actually like not starting the conversation off with like, let's talk about sex, right? Like it is like, you know, these are the forms of what we're talking about with comprehensive and complete sexuality education. And this is what we mean by that, right? It is different than just like the ability to get pregnant or not, right? Like it is deeper than that, right? It is connected to abortion access and stigma. It is connected to immigrant justice. It is connected to racial justice and social change. And so we have to really like talk to people about what sex ed is and what sex ed is not. And we'll really learn that sex ed is not like this rudimentary concept that we talk about in the way, frankly, most white sex educators talk about. Like I think about people like Erica Hart. I think about honestly the work that Jennfer does. I think about like literally people who talk about sex ed in a way that change people's lives because it is rooted in like racial justice and social justice and repro justice, and not just like pregnancy or not. So that's a lot, but I really do hope that's helpful.
Go ahead, Dom.
Quickly, like being in the classroom every day, and I worked in most of like the youth detention centers and the alternative schools. And what was really important for me, because I was getting access to comprehensive sex education while I was teaching it, is how I felt. And I realized a couple of things quickly is that I was educating most likely 3 generations, a young person, their parent, and their grandparent. So really understand like the epistemological barriers when it comes to that. Really affirming these fears, even if they don't feel like they are valid fears to you, you have to affirm them, you have to step in them. Stop sending white folks to teach Black children. If you are white teaching Black children, be very transparent about the experience of white folks around sex education and sex positivity and sexual liberation and the difference for Black folks, and really let them use the language they use. Offer the language that comes with the education, and not affirm the language they use. It was without question, somebody would be called a hoe in my classroom and the teacher would want to put everybody out. And I said, no, ma'am. Everybody, we're gonna write hoe on the board and we're gonna talk about what hoe means. When you say that, what do you mean? Mm-hmm. And watching the young women, how they carry the term, and the young men, the queer folks in the room, and how it's living. So be adaptable. Y'all got these, you got compliance and what is it? Fidelity, I get it.
Fidelity.
Especially Planned Parenthood girls. Y'all live for fidelity. But do that, but make sure these kids feel seen. And I promise you, consistency in that will help them really own it. Because you're trying to help a community own something that has been stolen for us since the beginning of us being stolen.
So we are near time. I want to know what's on the horizon for y'all. Taissa, I know you have some young folks in Texas and Michigan. Preston, I know y'all have some stuff going on. Black and Pink has some stuff going on. Tell us what's on the horizon really quickly so the folks know what y'all are doing. and like what's going on?
Sure, yeah. We do at the task force a sex ed project where we help build leadership development skills and organizing skills with young LGBTQ folks in different states. We have 2 members of the sex ed cohorts in the past, one from Dallas, one from Detroit, and we're going to be talking on the New York City Pride Human Rights Conference around LGBTQ sex ed and the role of consent.
Thank you.
So I'll just quickly share that if you have not read URGE's Young People's Reproductive Justice Policy Agenda, it is like a participatory agenda setting process that is informed by young people with young people, laying out 6 policy priorities that young people wanted to see from our organization and really for the world, from real abortion access to comprehensive sexuality education to decriminalizing sex work and creating safe and brave communities. And so just a little bit of a pivot there. It is 2 months, it is only 2 months old, so it's still hot-ish off the presses, and was supported by Congresswoman Barbara Lee and Ayanna Pressley. So, you know, some really amazing Black women who supported it. I also want to share that URGE is in the process of really revamping our integrated voter engagement campaign, because a lot of our work is also in democracy reform. So part of our integrated voter engagement campaign this year is on Divest and Invest Again. So divesting and defunding law enforcement and school resource officers and investing that money back into healthcare, specifically abortion access, and specifically making sure that young people have housing. So those are just 2 things that I want to talk about. Definitely find more information at urge.org and feel free to donate.
Perfect. Dom or David?
Our Black and Pink work, stuff that's really accessible. We are going to be working this week on a consistent schedule of online offerings, from supporting people around developing their bail programs. David and Nikki on our team are developing a space for white folks in the work to talk to white folks about the shenanigans in said work. Our founder, Jason Leiden, and Pastor Dale Brown here in Omaha are gonna be working around spirituality and abolition. Things are coming out, there'll be a calendar, again, consistency. When I think about, we also have the National LGBT Criminal Working Group, and that meeting online is this week for a few hours, and we'll be having information about the September meeting, which we hope will be in person, but we will be flexible in regards to that. Black and Pink Spell program, there's a trans health initiative that our programs team are working hard on with some amazing trans advocates across the country, including currently incarcerated trans folks. And our housing, like addressing the fact that it seems so cool and cute and radical to bail people out, but bail them out and where? Bail them out and where? Where do they live? Where do they eat? So really those services. We have the toolkits that are in real time, that our staff is curating. So get those toolkits, share those, please. And last but not least, a major kind of thing that we're building up to. We opened Lighthouse in February of this year, which was really transformational around housing and support. And then the next Lighthouse will be for youth who are like in that adolescent space of queer youth who are system impacted. And it's gonna take us about $1 million to make that happen, but there's gonna be a school where we'll be able to teach comp sex ed all day, every day if we want to. Folks can live and eat. And last but not least, really from a policy lens, how do we as folks who are looking at justice really push forward the truth that comprehensive sex education is a tool to dismantle mass incarceration? So how can we work with folks like SIECUS and URGE, but also like policy and public health folks? Y'all have to believe that. And not just believe it like inside text messages, but believe it in the work. And how do we build out those partnerships? So you're gonna see us pushing some of those things out in the next couple of months as well.
Y'all, attendees, help me thank my wonderful panelists. I am both excited. This conversation was amazing. It was what I needed. I hope what others needed as well. This is just, it's been really great. And I thank each and every one of you for joining in on this today's call. If you don't see the shout outs, they are coming, they are flooding in right now. So thank you all so much. For those of you who are joining us the rest of the week, the next webinar is tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Feel free to go online, register for it. That one has almost 500 people, so it's almost reached its cap. So make sure you get in and register. And with that, I will say thank you, and everyone have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Jennfer.
Thank you. Bye.